I always gown for Potter. This is a nice room. I like this room. In 1997, I was in my office, which is a few hundred yards from here, and the telephone rang. There's a man called Wolfgang. Wolfgang invited me to become part of a European research project looking at national identity and looking at citizenship. And there were a group of us who were historians, all really specializing in history of education. And so we went to meet, grand tour, we did a lot of fine dining. And when we go to these places, and when you meet colleagues for the first time, what you tend to do is you tend to introduce yourself. You tend to tell them who you are and where you come from. And I told them that I was at this university. Nobody had heard of it, apart from Wolfgang, of course, who'd invited me. And so I started to tell them a little bit about the place. And I also showed them this photograph. It's a photograph from my office window. It is one of the great views. And one of my other colleagues said, "Wow, it looks just like Harry Potter." I said, "Well, it's funny you should say that." Because in the year that I had the phone call from Wolfgang, J.K. Rowling published the first of the septology, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And whilst we were meeting, there were also film crews from Warner Brothers were in Durham filming the first two films. When I told them about the Great Hall in Durham Cathedral, in Durham Castle, I should say, Great Hall in Durham Castle, which the film crew wanted to use for the Great Hall at Hogwarts, except it's used often for wedding receptions, and the film crews needed it for 3 weeks filming, and they couldn't keep taking the equipment up and down, so they ended up somewhere else. But they did use the cathedral, and in fact you can see the cathedral towers in all the Harry Potter films. When I told them about High Table, when I told them about the balls and the banquets and the gowning up, they started to convince me more and more that this was a little bit like Hogwarts. But I have to confess, I hadn't really read Harry Potter. I'd heard of it, of course, but I hadn't read it. When I started writing for the book that we published, which was ironically, given the conference title, was about patterns, European patterns, I began to think about whether or not this phenomena that I'd heard of, Harry Potter, the boy wizard, was anything like one of the other things that I had taught about, which was about Tom Brown and Tom Brown's school days. It's part of my history of education lectures on the public school system. Tom Brown with Arnold at rugby. Arnold, who it is said, his office was at the top of a spiral staircase. Arnold, who was a man and a myth. Arnold, who became incredibly influential. Arnold, where there was a blurring of myth and reality, and they were in Durham and they were filming Harry Potter. I started to talk to my students because I was writing this chapter. I said, look, should I be putting a line in here about Harry Potter, the new Tom Brown? And so I did, and then it didn't get in the final cut, which is a shame for Harry. But then I started to incorporate Potter into some of my lectures. I started to talk about whether Harry Potter was a good citizen. I certainly started to talk about whether Harry Potter, the books and the films now, were quintessentially British. And more students started to ask me, could they have more and more on Potter? And so the germ of an idea began to creep into my head. Would it be possible to do a university module, not a course, tragically, a university module on Harry Potter? And I came up with this idea of Harry Potter and the Age of Illusion. And the story is a long and complex one, except to say that eventually I did come up with the idea. I put it to the university, and it went before a series of committees. It had to get through a critical first committee, but as I was chairing the committee, it got through. But eventually, the university approved it, and students started to enroll on it. And during that first summer, I started to send them emails saying that I know where you will be in 2 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days. Do you? Signed, Gilderoy. I'll just send it off. Goodness knows what they thought, who they were being stalked by. Just 1 week to go. By this time tomorrow, you will know where the opening lecture of the Harry Potter module will be taking place. Tonight, at midnight, an owl will tap on your computer screen to reveal the location of the opening lecture. And of course, because of the wizardry of computer technology, I was able, using our Durham University online intranet system, to wait till midnight to press a button, and it was revealed. Within an hour, the location had been leaked to the BBC. The BBC then started to ask, could they film it, because the first so-called lecture was in the Great Hall of Durham Castle. Now, for those of you who are Durham students and those of you who know the place, the Great Hall, should be reasonably familiar to you, at least if you're not a member of University College, you should know about it. And it was going to take place then. It was going to be a sorting ceremony. And the students got terribly excited, and they were gowned up for the sorting ceremony. And the film crews wanted to come, and the film crews were denied entry because they couldn't get past the prefects who were on guard to get up to the peninsula, to get into Castle, to get into the Great Hall. And all the tables were decked out in the house colours, and the students were very nervous, and they were sorted into one of 4 houses. It was theatre. But it was theatre with a purpose. Because at the end of the sorting ceremony, I asked how many times had they been sorted previously? Were they sorted at birth? Does it matter what sort of family you come from? Does it matter whether you're an only child? Does it matter whether you have several brothers and sisters? Does it matter whether you're oldest, whether the youngest? Does it matter which school you go to? Does it matter which university you go to? Does it matter if you come to this university, which college you're in? All the time we are sorted. Sorting is so important in life. And so this opening lecture, the sorting ceremony, was theatre, but theatre with a purpose. Sorting takes place, of course, in the books and in the film. Though, of course, we do know that Harry has already pre-selected Draco as somebody who he doesn't like. Draco Malfoy, Slytherin, Severus Snape, Slytherin, the sibilance, the snake. Members of Slytherin House are derided for being ambitious. Then is ambitious a sin? Draco, of course. We learn a lot about Draco. Those of you who know the story. will know one of the most significant episodes is when Draco has his Judas moment in Malfoy Manor. When there are 3 people dragged in, one over there is Ronald Bilious Weasley. The other next to him is Hermione Jean Granger. And on the floor, on his knees, face distorted by a stinging jinx, is who? Well, Draco is asked the question by his father, who is this third character? If he can confirm that it is indeed Harry Potter, Draco's entire family will be rehabilitated. Draco faces his Judas moment. Draco looks at Ronald Bilious Weasley. He looks at Hermione Jean Granger. He looks at the third person in front of him. He knows who that third person is. It's the test, the moment, the Judas moment. And he passes the test. These characters become very significant. And I thought by studying them, by looking at them, then what we could do is cast a light also on ourselves and our human condition. So what we have is that lady, over a 10-year period, writes these books. Professionally, of course, I talk about these books. I don't talk about them in terms of literature as such. I'm certainly no English professor. But I talk about the significance of them. I talk about the line in this book here, The Goblet of Fire, the line that changes the entire series. One line. Children's books, children's books, children's books. One line in the fourth one, The Goblet of Fire. Kill the spare. When Cedric dies not in a glorious way. Cedric dies in the most commonplace, banal way, merely snuffed out. And the entire series changes. Of course, we have Warner Brothers producing not 7 but 8 films. And this idea of book, film, book relationship. So why do it? Why? Is it fit for study? Why should we bother in a university like this to study these books? Can we learn anything about ourselves or anything from these books? Are there other books that we could learn? Well, primarily the reason for looking at these is the global phenomena that is Potter. 500 million books or thereabouts sold. Those are books, by the way, books that require reading. This is not a computer game, not to deride computer games, but this is a generation of children and of adults who live in an electronic world. And these are books. Books that require reading. How many films, videos, and all the merchandising that goes with it? So why this focus on it? Sebastian Faulks, who's most famous for writing lots of stuff, Birdsong, of course, probably in particular, did a terrific TV series called Faulks on Fiction. It's also the book that goes with it. And said that in fiction we meet people whose inner lives we get to know so well that they become more real sometimes than our own family and friends, and we can learn from them. Philip Pullman, of his Dark Materials fame, to whom we gave an honorary degree a couple of years ago, could have been last year, the year before, can't remember. gave a wonderful lecture at the University of East Anglia called Miss Goddard's Grave. Miss Goddard was an actress, and it was all centered on the notion of the school of morals, suggesting that through literature we could learn so much about ourselves and about our place in the world and about how we should relate one with another. We've heard a lot of talks today about relationships through literature. And this worldwide phenomena that is not a part of the planet, who is not touched by Harry Potter. In the opening chapter, Professor McGonagall says to Dumbledore, there will be books written about him. Every child in our world will know his name, and it is true. So what can we get out of it? What can we glean from Potter and from the Potterverse? This idea, of course, of Harry and Draco, Harry and Severus, this idea of first impressions. And if there are many, many lessons in J.K. Rowling's work, not least about which is about how first impressions can be wrong. Doesn't mean to say Draco's a nice guy, but he passed his Judas moment. Doesn't mean Severus Snape is nice, but he has qualities. And this idea of first impressions, this idea of what by investing in the story, as my students do, as I do, and as others have done, we can learn quite a lot about friendship, about loyalty, about courage, and about duty. Duty, a four-letter word of enormous power. What does duty mean? And in terms of Harry, should he not have come to the aid of his government, the Ministry of Magic, when asked by Rufus Scrimgeour, but he says he's not going to be the minister's poster boy. It's about love and it's about death. Death is on every page, according to J.K. Rowling, but love, that great, great motivator and concept that we all yearn for. It's about the notion of reality. Just because this is happening inside your head, Harry, doesn't mean that it is not real. So when we had our sorting ceremony, was it real? When I go into the chapter house in the cathedral, am I in Professor McGonagall's classroom? When I walk down the cloisters, is this gown real? Are our professors real? High table, the balls, the banquets, all those things, are they not real? That blurring of myth and reality, that blurring of Arnold the myth, Arnold the reality. Lots of people talk about bubbles, we talk about the Durham bubble. Some of you here are maybe final year students and you're going to leave the bubble. Is it living in a fantasy world? Because our sorting was real. The great hall was real, the gown was real. And when, in a couple of months' time, I will present the House Cup to those students who've earned the most points for their house. So far, Hufflepuff have won it 3 times on the trot, which is astonishing. But there we go, they have my congratulations. We learn from studying about Potter something about ourselves. If we take this idea of the school of morals, if we take this idea of Miss Goddard's grave, if we take this idea of Sebastian Faulks saying that in fiction we meet people whose inner lives are so real to us. This idea of the search for enlightenment, this idea of the journey, this idea of the Bildungsroman, of coming to enlightenment. Harry spends all the novels trying to work out who he is, trying to work out his place in the world, trying to work out what his duty is. And at the end of the day, That's all we ever do as human beings. We spend a lifetime trying to get to know who we are. We spend a lifetime trying to get to know what our duty is. Some people are narrow and selfish. Some people will do things for other people. We've heard some wonderful examples of that today, and my admiration to them is boundless. Harry Potter, the Boy Who Lived, is the title of the opening chapter of the opening book. My contention is, it is Harry Potter, the Boy Who Lives. Thank you for your patience.